Hello, my name is Jacqueline, and I am super excited to share with you an interview today with a couple of fantastic designers for how to decorate your bookshelves. We're all stuck in our homes now, and I think this is the perfect time to look around and find projects that you can do to make your space more beautiful, more comfortable, and just happier to be in. So let me introduce our designers. Here we are. Hannah, could I start with you? Could you introduce yourself to everyone?
Yes, my name is Hannah Lewick. I've been with Habitar Design for 9 years now. Yeah, and I'm excited to talk with you guys about how to style your bookshelves. I know since I've been at home, I've definitely been styling my bookshelves as well, and I'm sure other people have been thinking about it. So it's a good topic to discuss for sure.
Thank you. We also have Mackenzie joining us. Mackenzie, if you'd like to introduce yourself for everyone.
Yeah, my name is Mackenzie Kane. I've been working with Habitar as a designer for the past 7 years now, and I am also very excited to talk with you guys.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much. I am so excited to have you both here, and I can't wait for the conversation to kind of get going and see what I learned, because I am not a designer, and I'm hiding my bookshelf so you can't see. I will need to learn some things during this interview and then apply those principles and see if I can make my home more beautiful. My first question is where to even start? Like when you think, okay, I want my, whether you move into a brand new place and you're starting from scratch, or whether you are staring at your shelves and they've just not been bringing you joy and you need to do something different, like where do you even start for how to style and decorate your bookshelves?
I mean, I think you want to start with the bigger pieces and kind of work your way down. That's kind of the best way to start. So things like bigger coffee table books, bigger picture frames, if you have enough height, in your bookcases. Start with those bigger items and then kind of fill in from there. I think that's a good way to think about it. And I think books are important because, I mean, obviously a lot of people's bookshelves are going to be filled with mainly books. So I think it's, worth thinking about, kind of editing your book collection. I personally don't like to use like paperback books on shelves just because they're a little sloppier looking. They tend to have been well loved and read and not very clean looking. So I think kind of editing down the books, deciding which ones you really want to display, try and keep to hardcover. And if you really want a monochrome look, you can always take all the covers off your hardcover books. So it's just kind of more simple colors than lots of text and different, fonts, and it's a little busier that way.
Oh, those are some great points. Mackenzie, do you have any kind of key main starting points to go off of what Hannah was saying?
Yeah, I mean, basically kind of jumping just to right before what I would do was what Hannah would say is I would just go around my house is what I always do and just collect everything that I want to include or potentially include and like put it on the table or whatever. And then you kind of look at your space and see, do I have enough stuff? Do I need more? And then just continue with what Hannah said and starting with like the bigger items, the books, and laying it, out and going from there.
Great. Thank you guys so much. I am going to go ahead and start sharing some photos so that we can kind of look through, see some beautiful examples, and then I'll have some more questions. We can point out kind of like what is right. All the photos are going to be beautiful, like after photos. So you can point out kind of what was done right here and how these different ideas were explored and executed. And when we hit some of these questions, we can show in the photos how that came together. I'm looking at this and I think it looks beautiful, but like, how did that happen? Because it wasn't an accident.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this client is like you guessed, is a huge reader. I mean, one of the first things she told me when we started designing these shelves is she's like, I just need room for all my books. I really want to be able to display all my books. So that was kind of the driving factor when we designed these shelves. So we did really focus on that. And once those floating shelves went in, she really played around with, I think a good thing she did is she mixed them both so they're up there both horizontally and vertically. I think that's a great way to kind of display the books, keeps it a little more interesting. And it also serves a functional purpose. If you don't want a million bookends up on your shelves, you can kind of use those horizontal books to function as your bookends. And I also like that she that we left some space. You know, we obviously added this beautiful reclaimed wood backdrop to these books to kind of make the colors of the books pop. And so it was important. I know one of the key rules I've heard in the past is fill your bookshelves up like 2/3 full. You want to have a little bit of negative space so it doesn't feel too cluttered or too busy. And I think we got that right here too.
Yeah, Mackenzie, is there anything you'd like to add for this? Certain things that you see really working here that people could have a takeaway from this photo that that caught your eye?
Yeah, I think Hannah did a really good job of kind of dispersing the groupings of books throughout. So again, kind of touching on the negative space that you can see, but also it's like your eye is visually drawn to all the different, you know, corners of the shelves because the books are placed really nicely, and you know the heavy parts are dispersed really nicely, which I think is important for any shelf setup that you're doing.
Something that I really like about this is, so for example, Hannah, you mentioned one of your kind of like preferences is you really like color. And I feel like this is a great example of the space itself has so much neutral colors going on. So it really works that there's such like an eclectic mix of colors in all these books. Although it does seem like the decor is kind of like the vases and the cute little art pieces are kind of sticking a little bit more to like blues and yellows, but the books were getting like lots of pops of color. And I feel like it looks fun. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't come across as like cluttered. And I think part of that has to do with how like mellow the rest of the space is.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is, you know, books and accessorizing your shelves is a great way to add color to a fairly neutral, simple space. Definitely add some interest and some fun. I mean, you could definitely make the space feel more formal if she took, you know, all the covers off those books and it is just kind of more monochromatic and simple, you know, and maybe just pops of color, like you said, in the vases to add a little bit of color, but not be as overwhelming. So there's definitely different ways you could style these shelves, but I do think that in this space, the right way to go was to leave all that color in there and have it be a little more fun just to offset the neutrals in the rest of the space.
Mm-hmm.
So for planning for more formal shelf spaces as opposed to a more kind of like functional family room, this is a more formal sitting room. And this person didn't want to overwhelm their shelves with books. You can see a few groupings, but this is a more kind of decorated space with like artwork and pieces versus housing their reading collection. So I would love to hear some thoughts on kind of an approach to a more formal space like this.
Yeah, this is definitely a formal living room. These clients came to me and wanted help just, you know, in the back of their house, they do have a family room, they have kids, you know, that is more comfortable, cozy. But this is the place when they had guests over, you know, a place they wanted to gather for more formal gatherings. The dining room is connected to this as well. And it was a small space, so we didn't want to overwhelm the space either. So that's another thing to consider when styling your bookcases is if it's a small space already, you don't want to make it feel more cluttered by putting a bunch of crap on your bookcases. You know, it's a smaller space like this, it makes sense to be kind of more subtle and more refined with what you put on the bookcases. So that's why they have, you know, just a few kind of key sculptural items, just a few books scattered throughout, and then a few picture frames to just kind of make it a little more personal without feeling too casual. But yeah, and overall, these are smaller bookcases too, so you just don't want to overwhelm them. I think this is where, like Mackenzie's point about gathering everything you potentially want to put on the shelves and kind of laying them out and looking at them, this really is a good place where it comes into play. Because when you do lay out all those items, you want to think about, okay, what do these pieces coordinate with each other and what doesn't? You know, you don't want to put two pieces together that are totally clash with each other or just style-wise don't seem right. You know, all the pieces on these shelves are a little more formal feeling, you know, or if they threw like a stuffed animal up on the bookshelf, you know, that would feel out of place, you know. Right. So it's important to definitely lay everything out and make sure that all your pieces kind of coordinate before putting them up. And then if it doesn't coordinate, you know, maybe find somewhere else in your home to display it.
This one I really love because I think that, especially for me living in Chicago and having a smaller condo space, anytime where I see like design and function coming together in like small sections, that I get excited because I think that's something I can actually replicate versus some of the big expansive pictures we see that don't kind of mirror what I have in my space. So I'd
Right.
love to hear about some of the thoughts on using a small space. Like looking at this, um, I definitely feel like it feels more spacious than maybe it is. I feel like there's like some tricks going on here. I want to hear about it.
You are exactly right. This is the smallest kitchen I've ever designed. It's very small and true to Chicago fashion. So I think it is, relevant for a lot of people. But it's really just keep it simple. Again, it's not, overloading the shelves by any means. These are, items, some are items that they use every day, like cookbooks. They're big chefs in this tiny kitchen. Cookbooks, and then like some bowls and coffee mugs that you use, but then also displaying, some wine glasses or things that are just pretty and you just want, to be able to see. And then kind of mirroring that with, a plant at the top. And then, again, bringing in some books at the top and at the bottom. Having some pieces that are heavier in terms of, solid colors versus some that are clear. I mean, even the like terrarium at the top, has that clear, visually clear structure, and then kind of the wine glasses and the fruit bowl at the bottom too. So it's really balancing out, what all is there. You have some color at the bottom and the top, the middle is very neutral. So just playing with different sizes, heights, and just spreading it out and not overloading each shelf.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah, I really like this because I think a lot of those kind of some of these concepts that we talked about, like having the different heights, is really apparent here. And I think that the way that the items are organized really does kind of create a feeling of negative space where there isn't necessarily negative space. And so I think that was such a cool trick here, like having the wine glasses and white items and then these clear like bottles here, that works so well to kind of, it doesn't feel like you have all these super packed shelves by having this be these like neutral items.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was something I noticed when looking at it, like there's a lot of stuff, but it doesn't feel crowded. So that's
Yes.
a really cool way to kind of think about how to work in a small space, is kind of how to organize your items so that you kind of keep those kind
Can
of
use
sections
them.
like that.
And this is, I think, the first one we looked at that's been in the kitchen, to where these are items that they're actually getting off and on the shelves like every day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just for display, it's actually for function, more so too. So I think that creating something visually pleasing but also functional is good for the small area, the small kitchen.
Absolutely. I'm going to take us to our next slide. Okay, so this space here, I like, it's different than other photos that we've looked at. What I think is interesting here is that we're not looking at built-ins, which most of what we've been looking at is built-ins. So this is more about like not only like decorating your shelves, but kind of like picking the shelves for the space too, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of having that go into part of the design. So I'd love to hear kind of some of the thoughts about picking these freestanding shelves in a space where they don't, come automatically built in, and then kind of like keeping that aesthetic going. Like, were the items first, were the shelves first? What was kind of the whole process here?
Right. So these people, we did all the furnishings in this house, and they had this really long living room to where they had this kind of dead space in the back. And so they were big travelers, still travelers, and have collected all these pieces. They have, you can see some travel books and things on there, and they didn't really have a lot of storage. So we decided, to put a desk space, for a workspace, but then also maximizing, basically just filling that wall with shelving. So that they could display all these things. So, we picked the shelves, and then again, like going back to, we literally collected everything that they had. Nothing of this is new other than the shelves themselves. So it's, putting everything down. What do you want to include? What functionally do you need at this desk space? And then filling in with all the books, all the display, and then, going through and making sure, playing with sizes, shapes, heights, things like that. But there was a lot of trial and error in this. We moved stuff around a lot, but it turned out pretty well.
So something else that I noticed in here that I would like to get your thoughts on, because I think this is really clever. I'm a person that maybe you know, has a lot of clutter, or I don't have like a lot of like storage area. Like we can see this desk is so clean. So I love that like you have these big like boxes here, which I assume are storing like documents, who knows what. But I think that like those could be so heavy, but it being in white, like adding those like storage elements to your space where you can have some out of sight items, but putting them in like a beautiful box. Like that's something that I wouldn't have thought of, especially keeping it like white and light so that it's not like looking like this big heavy eyesore. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on like kind of balancing the books with the art items with clearly some like functional stuff that wasn't like able to just be on display on its own.
Sure. I basically, if someone has an open shelf that goes floor to ceiling, there's no like cabinets at the bottom, I almost always tell them to do some sort of box, some sort of basket, something heavier where you can actually, you know, catch all items, pillows, blankets, things like that, documents, just because visually, like that's going to ground the whole built-in bookshelf and it's functional. So you get the storage kind of at the base, and it's kind of something that you're not down kind of looking at it anyway. So visually, like you can't put a lot of things on, you know, the base and it be visually pleasing. It's going to be the things that are higher. So that's going to be the space that you want to actually put things that you just need to store there. So I almost always do like a basket or something heavier down at the bottom. And then doing that mirrored on both sides, it's hard to see in this photo both, but we did the boxes on both sides. There you go. So that it kind of mimicked, you know, each in a different layout, but mimicked and then worked up towards, you know, the top being a little lighter. So the next level above the boxes is mostly books. So they had a lot of books again to display. So we did, you know, a mixture of different heights, some on side, some standing up, and then kind of went up there and mimicked kind of the look on each side. So it got a little bit, it's heavier at the bottom and gets a little lighter at the top. But it's somewhat symmetrical, but obviously not perfect.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of, you were talking about grouping by grouping the items and kind of varying the heights. Now in these particular shelves, even being floor to ceiling, they had looks like they had a lot of items to put on display. And so the shelves aren't super like high in between. There wasn't like a ton of height to work with, but I still see that concept you were talking about of varying heights, even when it's subtle. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about talking about even in like shorter shelves, how that's still achievable, and kind of maybe how you picked some of those groupings and varied that around to make it like the shelves appear really tall with that varying height. So I'd love to hear kind of how you kind of specifically like went after that.
Yeah. I mean, I like to focus basically on one little area. So, you know, whether it's like, as you can see kind of on that middle shelf there, there's like a vase, a little trinket, and then like a frame. And so I like to focus on like, this is a little group. How can I make this little group look appropriate? So you try to bring in something that's a little taller, wider, shorter, and then this little like vignette is okay. And then you pair that with across, okay, what would go well with this that I've already created? Do I need to add a couple books for this airplane to sit higher? Or do I need to add, you know, 5 so it's, you know, evenly height across? So you kind of have to play with the different groups individually, and then you have to look at it as a whole and, you know, move things around, you know, stack the books where you need so things are higher, or pull in a taller vase or a shorter piece, and kind of switch things out until, you know, things are looking pretty even overall.
So this room I actually recognize from the website. If you have visited the Habitar Design website, I know that this room is on there. It's a little bit more of a recent one, I think. So I'd love to hear a little bit about this. This is one where we were talking as well about sometimes there's a guideline of maybe having your shelves only 2/3 full. But if you have a functionality that you need and you have a lot of items, your shelves might be more full. And how do you still keep them looking edited and polished and not overwhelming? And this, I think, captures that too. There's certainly a lot of books. This family clearly are readers, but I'm not overwhelmed. It doesn't look overdone. So how did that work here?
You know, if you do have a ton of books to display, or if those are videos or whatnot, you can get away with it if you kind of, you know, if it's evenly dispersed. I mean, I think books are the only thing that you could really like fill your whole shelves with, and it looks pretty neat. So I do think that this does well. You know, you have the play of the offset kind of asymmetrical built-ins in the shelves with like the pop of color already in the doors. So, you know, bringing in that, you know, wide range of color in the books kind of packed in there, it just kind of blends together, but still adds, you know, visually color into the room. But yeah, I think it does well, and just showing that you can fill up your bookshelves if you have, you know, the right setup without it looking, you know, overcrowded or too being too much.
So then these pieces down here look like drawers, and then these lighter orange are actually, you said, doors to cabinets?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, because if that's the case, I think that's like an interesting takeaway as well, in that in the space overall here, it kind of creates like, almost creates like a negative space. Like it makes it so we don't get too overwhelmed with items, but it's actually hiding functional used items, kind of like we were talking about in a previous photo, the white boxes on the bottom of the shelves. These allow for pops of neutral space where we're still getting functionality out of them. It's not necessarily like blank space.
Exactly. I think that when we say like negative space or empty space, it doesn't actually have to be empty. You know, I think it's just kind of lighter visually than the rest of the space. So even though this is a bright orange color, it's still just a flat, simple surface. You know, it's not busy, it's not cluttered.
Okay, so for this space, this is going to be a little bit different than some that we've been looking at because it's not a traditional bookshelf. This looks more like an entryway table or like a sidebar. So I want to hear about how this came together.
Yeah, so I threw this in here because, again, like not everyone has these like, you know, bookshelves or even a bookshelf in their house, but they're going to have some sort of tabletop surface, I'm sure. So being able to kind of even display just one little tabletop, I think is important. But again, it's focusing on those same things. It's, you know, having kind of that higher piece in the back, which is kind of like center wooden piece, and then creating, you know, some sort of symmetry with things on each side, but again, varying in heights and varying in color, but kind of playing with too, like this is all very similar colors, like it's in the same color palette. So you have, you know, the greens of the plants, which we haven't even talked about plants, but those are nice to add to any display.
We should talk about plants.
Yeah, we should. But just kind of bringing in, you know, evening out, putting a plant on each side so you have that green kind of natural feel, and then, you know, putting some books if you need kind of on one side and balancing out with, you know, a piece on the other. But again, also you mentioned the height of the hats on the wall. If, you know, if you need to kind of, if you have a tall ceiling and this isn't really doing it for you, you can add some things, artwork, hats, any sort of like wall decor, just to kind of bring your eyes up visually. I think it does a nice job.
Something else that I really like about this, we've kind of talked about the more narrow your color palette, the more formal the space is. And I think this is a good example of that, because while the pieces are more kind of like unique, they're not like, it's not like it doesn't look like it could be a catalog like out of anyone's home. You know, we've got like a cactus sculpture and we've got the actual like living cactus plant, but basically we've got like this green, this black, and then this kind of like taupe color. Having only 3 colors, and with both taupe and black being very neutral, and then with the green and the plant almost coming across as a neutral too, this comes across as like a very like sophisticated looking area for me. And so I think that's so cool to combine. It's like super sophisticated, but also it's got that like, there's a rock and a cactus, you know what I mean? So it's like combining kind of like that, those elements of like nature, which are more rustic, to like the sophistication of the color palette. So I think this comes together. Like this seems like it would be an Instagram on Instagram. This would be a trending thing.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that just sticking with, I mean, just going back to sticking with like, you know, a few colors really kind of ties everything together. You know, these could have been all, you know, random different colors. It wouldn't look quite as cohesive, but as long as you kind of stick with that same color palette of a few pieces, I think it really can go a long way.
I wanted to go over kind of some of the main takeaways that I learned, and then I want you each to share some of your major, like, what are kind of the rules that you would recommend if someone is about to go attack their shelves right now after watching this? I think the main thing that I learned is, first of all, I think I have some editing to do, because I think I do have some junk that, kind of looking at all of those, I have some junk that needs to go in those like bottom shelves in a box. I need to get some boxes for the bottoms of my shelves, because I've got stuff out that's just like, it doesn't need to be the focal point. So I might as well kind of get it down low, or where like I can get it when I need it, but it's not that big of a deal. That was a big takeaway for me. And then that height balance, that wasn't something that I think I really noticed before. I think that I'm the type of person that would have just had a total row of books across one shelf. And so that's something that I want to do, is kind of like rearrange, even if it's only rearranging the order of the books to kind of create some stuff, as well as trying to group my books by color, because I've never done that. I've always been like I have Harry Potter. Here's my Harry Potter books. Here's my cookbooks. I've never kind of tried mixing them up. And I think that looks like a really fun way to make a space look actually styled on purpose. So those are some of my main takeaways. But for somebody else that's watching this for the first time that is thinking, okay, what are some of the main key kind of like rules or guidelines, even though we can break them once we learn them, what would you suggest for a beginner?
Getting your shelf area, clear it all off, collect everything that you would hope to include on that. And then, breaking it up, I think making sure that you have a few, either if you want a lot of color, then making sure you have a lot of color, but also just if you want to stick to like a certain aesthetic, stick to a few colors. And then making sure you have some large items, some smaller items, some layerable items, and then kind of, dispersing those on the shelves. I think that's kind of the first way to go about it. And then it's trial and error. I mean, you move stuff around a bunch of times until you're happy, and you may have to go out and buy some more things if like I need a taller vase in that corner or whatever. I think that's, the best way to go about it.
I would say it's, as Mackenzie says, it's definitely trial and error. Don't get frustrated if it takes a long time. Sometimes it's even, you set a shelf up and then like walk away from it for a little bit, like get away from it for 15 minutes, then come back and see if you still like it, or if something sticks out to you that you don't think is quite right. Definitely take your time with it. It's one thing that takes even designers a long time to do. It's not an easy process. But yeah, I mean, I think if you lay everything out that you want to display, kind of edit out the pieces that don't, coordinate together, don't give you the style you're looking for, and then just kind of start playing around with them from there. And, if, like Mackenzie said, if you get everything up there that you like and you still have some space that you feel like needs something, go out to the store, pick out a few things that you think could potentially work, and then, edit from there. I do have clients who I'm just like, if you just want to make your shelves look pretty and don't necessarily care what's on them, just go buy a bunch of stuff from the store, put it on your shelves, see what works, and then just return what you don't use. Because it's hard to really tell until you get it home what's going to look right.
Well, thank you both so much. It was such a thrill, really. That sounds silly, but it was. It was so great to have you both here and to learn. And it was interesting too, being able to see photos from both of your personal spaces and see those different design aesthetics and compare that to the different spaces that you've worked in for clients, and really just see that every place is so different and still so successful. So it really is so individual to each person in each space. And I think that should give a lot of like fun inspiration to folks as they try at home, because although there's guidelines and ways to make it work, it's not because that person's items made it work, because all these different people's items all worked in their homes. So I'm really excited people to go and kind of like get some renewed life into their spaces by rearranging their shelves and purposefully, intentionally styling those. And thank you both so much for giving your time and your expertise and sharing with us all your tips and beautiful photos. And hopefully we'll be able to do another interview another time on more topics that people can address when designing their homes.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. Like and subscribe for more interviews and Habitar Design tips for you. If you need help with your shelves or any other interior design or home renovation needs, reach out to us at habitardesign.com.